Man, it seems as if like the Knicks might have made a massive mistake. Now, one of the talking points that have really taken over the NBA community over the past couple of weeks are the Knicks and where exactly should we project them heading into the latter part of the regular season as well as into the playoffs. Now, on the surface, it seems as if like the Knicks are right where a lot of optimistic people had them before the season began. Comfortably in the third seed, could round out one of the better regular seasons that we've seen from the franchise in quite some time. And what is really leading the charge is their offense, the dynamic duo of Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns, though Towns as of late hasn't looked as dominant that he did early on this season, especially with his shooting, it's still very prevalent and has consistently kept this Knicks offense in top 10 standings. But when you do a little bit more digging, peel back some layers, you quickly start to find a lot of concerns for a Knicks team that made steep commitments to a roster that is not poised to make a deep postseason run. Now, personally, I believe a lot of the concerns originate with Mitchell Robinson and his return. Granted, he's already played. His season debut was not too long ago. However, I thought we all believed that the original timetable was much sooner than the end part of February. And with Mitchell Robinson being out this much of the season, it has really exposed how bad this defense has truly been. Despite the fact that the New York Knicks have had a top 3 offense and a net rating that's hovering around top 5 status, what prevents them from being in elite level status has to be their defense. There's never really been a point in the season where they've had a subpar to average defense rather than living towards that bottom 10 status in the NBA. And in particular, in the last 15 games, even though the offense has been really, really great, the defense has damn near been just as bad. And so you still present yourself with a net rating that is borderline neutral. It does beg the question if one player can be so impactful that it will turn around the trajectory of what this team can look like on that side of the ball. I think a lot of people are also concerned on who exactly Mikal Bridges is defensively, even though there were a lot of signs pointing into the direction that he really wasn't the same elite level defender that he was out in Phoenix within his time in Brooklyn. Now, to be fair, a lot of people who, again, were optimistic believe that, hey, on a lesser offensive responsibility, putting him alongside OG Anunoby, we may be able to receive the old Phoenix Suns defensive-oriented Mikal Bridges back, but that player seems as if like we're too far removed from those years. And so, as great as OG Anunoby is and Josh Hart and Mikal Bridges still give quality effort, at the end of the day, you're spending a lot of minutes on the floor with Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns. And early on this season, to be fair to Towns, he was pretty solid defensively, or at least exceeded my expectations. But as of late, they've been it's been pretty bad for Towns. It doesn't look too good. That Boston game, he just didn't look too good defensively whatsoever. Matter of fact, I'm watching them going up against the Miami Heat right now. Still doesn't look too good defensively. Teams are just picking him apart in pick and roll action. And so, there's that. Now, another big concern that a lot of people have has to be the minutes that are being played. Tibbs is going to Tibbs, and so he's going to go out there and play a lot of heavy minutes to Josh Hart, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, and even probably a little bit more minutes than he should be given to both Karl Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson. And it's not just about the minutes that are being given, it's how they're being used within these minutes, because for whatever reason, Tibbs has just not, and I don't know why he doesn't do this, but he has not formulated a defensive scheme that is not overly dependent on one's individual defensive ability. Sure, every now and then you might see a shade or two, or you might see a dig, but for the most part, the Knicks overly rely, in my opinion, on one-on-one defenders without sending that much help, and so you have a lot more of communication and running around that needs to be had, which then translate into Mikal Bridges running the most miles so far this season in the NBA, Josh Hart being third, and Jalen Brunson being fourth. So not only are these players playing a lot of minutes, but also they're being ran into the ground when they are on the floor with some of the responsibilities that they're being asked. But as of late, the biggest concern that many people have for the New York Knicks, and what's stopping many people from being true believers that the Knicks can really take that next step into title contention conversations, or at least competing with some of the best teams, is because they can't compete with some of the best teams. Recently, the Knicks matched up with the Cavs and the Boston Celtics twice. They lost all 3 of those games, which then opened the dialogue of who exactly have they beat of competency. In particular, what do they look like with some of the top tier teams in the NBA? And come to find out, they are 0-7 against the 3 best teams in the league. And of course, when I say the top 3 teams, I'm talking about Boston, Cleveland, and OKC. Now, to be fair, 2 of these teams are winning at a historic rate, and Boston, I do believe, just is a mismatch problem. However, it's not just that they're losing. They are getting beat pretty handily. It's actually pretty concerning. So the first first game of the season, they lost to the Boston Celtics 132-109. The third game of the season, they matched up with the Cleveland Cavaliers 110-104, so a little bit closer. Then on January 3rd, they matched up with the Oklahoma City Thunder, where they lost 117-107, and that doesn't seem like that big of a deal, only a 10-point loss. However, the margin of victory is a bit deceptive. In the fourth quarter, the Knicks nearly allowed 40 points from OKC, so that's really concerning. Then they lost to the Thunder again on January 10th, 126-101. February 8th, they lost to the Boston Celtics 131-104. The Cavaliers on the 21st, 142-105. And then finally, February 23rd, they lost to the Boston Celtics 118-105. Again, a bit deceptive. A 13-point loss didn't seem like that big of a deal. However, they were down by 20 points towards the tail end of the fourth quarter before the starters finally came off of the floor. So, yeah, it's one thing to lose, but I mean, it's another thing when you're not even remotely close. And then you can go back to some of the other games matching up against some of the better teams in the NBA, like the Los Angeles Lakers, where they lost. The Minnesota Timberwolves that have their matchup, they lost to them. A Detroit Pistons team that has really turned it around, not only this season, but in particular in the last month and a half, they lost against them as well. Not to say they don't have any quality wins underneath their belt. They did beat the Denver Nuggets, the Milwaukee Bucks, Houston Rockets, but it certainly does question what exactly is this team trying to present to us before the postseason arrive, which then has allowed many people to go down this rabbit hole of potentially having buyer's remorse as a Knicks fan. We should not have thrown that many draft picks at Mikal Bridges. Look at how much money Karl-Anthony Towns is getting paid. And on top of that, due to the level of financial commitment we made, there really isn't no wiggle room for us to make any significant additions or improvements to the roster because how much money we're giving OG Towns. Then Mikal wants a contract. Then a new contract for Jalen Brunson is going to kick in next year as well. We're talking about $200 million basically committed to this roster next season. So yeah, a lot of things going on with the Knicks. And on one hand, I want to sit here and make it seem like, oh my God, everything is going crazy in New York. But I don't know. I kind of feel like I don't know why y'all... I don't know. Every team isn't going to win a championship, bro. And I kind of feel like everything that I talked about in this video and the things that people are concerned with, we knew that already. You're telling me you're surprised that Thibodeau on a roster that doesn't have that many rotational players anyway, that's very top heavy, that's missing one of their starting 5 players in Mitchell Robinson for most of the season. You're telling me you're surprised, you're that concerned that Tibbs of all coaches is playing heavy minutes of players? Wowzers. I can't believe you're that surprised by it. You're telling me you're that surprised that despite the fact that this team can teeter historic offensive firepower when everyone is making their shots, defensively they're so bad that they're still only being able to beat teams by very small margins, especially as of late. You're telling me you're surprised by that? I'm not. I'm not surprised that even if you have OG, Josh Hart, adding Mitchell Robinson with Mikal, that's not going to be enough when you have 2 really bad defensive players on the floor in Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns, especially when Towns is spending most of the season being backline help in a defensive scheme that isn't really giving him that much rotational help when he's getting picked on in pick and roll situations. That's not that crazy to me. And no, the idea that people are going crazy having buyer's remorse because they gave how many picks for Mikal Bridges, that sounds about right. People are upset and they started to finally click to them how much money OG Anunoby is getting paid. Yes, that sounds about right. Many people like myself were trying to explain that to people before the season began. However, I just let it go because I also started to realize everyone doesn't have to win a championship, right? As a Knicks fan, I'm pretty sure you are happy watching your team compete for once. This is a very, very long time. With the Jalen Brunson era last year, y'all competed, but you kind of get what I'm saying. It's been a while since the Knicks have been able to establish themselves as a playoff team. And so, even though it does feel like they swung for the fences during last year's offseason, bringing in Mikal Bridges, bringing in Karl-Anthony Towns, made a big deal at last year's deadline by bringing in OG Anunoby, and it felt as if you were cultivating something really special. And I'm not saying that it can't be, because it certainly can. The truth of the matter is, especially in this new CBA, this financial commitment keeps you stuck. The lack of defensive talent that's going to help Karl-Anthony Towns, it keeps you stuck. And this is something that I said during the offseason as well as many other people. If you're going to make these type of commitments to this roster, I would assume it would to bring someone along like a Giannis Antetokounmpo or a Anthony Davis or someone who can consistently present themselves as a top 5 to 7 player in the NBA. I love Karl Karl-Anthony Towns. He's been much more impressive than I think a lot of people want to give him credit for all season long. Defensively, again, he's slipping a little bit, but even that really and truly shouldn't be a surprise. But Towns is ending this season having the best season that he's had in quite some time. And so I don't know. I kind of feel like the Knicks are maxing out as who they have always been. If you ever believed that the Knicks were going to be a team that was going to make a conference finals appearance, I think that you are being very, and I do mean very generous to what this roster was going to look like. Again, I can understand the optimism that surrounded with Mikal Bridges and who potentially he was going to be on a roster with less offensive responsibility, which means he should up his defensive presence. And so I understand that, and maybe that's a bit of a disappointment. I understand that you thought that Mitchell Robinson was going to be back a little bit sooner than the end of February. I understand it as well. But like, y'all are surprised that they're a bottom 10 defense? Like, really? Y'all are surprised? Y'all are surprised that they can't compete with historically great teams? Like, I don't know what to tell y'all. I feel like this is just another moment where people just want to complain for the sake of complaining. When I watch the Knicks, I enjoy what I'm watching. A bit concerning because I'm like, damn, a 7-man rotation in January? That's tough. Like I ain't gonna lie, a part of it is tip, but also like the roster's top heavy. I ain't never seen nobody run a playoff rotation all January long. That's crazy. But at the end of the day, bro, I go into these games watching the Knicks with very, and I do mean very, tapered expectations. I do not believe that this team can compete with the top 3 to 5 teams in the NBA, 2 of which are in their conference. And so, yeah, it's more than likely going to be a second round exit if they match up with the Boston Celtics in the second round. Like, that's what it's going to be. And I kind of felt like we all knew that was going to happen anyway. I kind of believe that we all knew that it was just a 2-team conference in the East. Sure, certain teams started to ring off a couple of wins. And for example, Karl-Anthony Towns had an amazing start to the season shooting wise. And so, yeah, they exceeded expectations in terms of the win and loss column. But who they are as a team, the expectation that people had for them, no, it's not that surprising. I don't know why people are going crazy. Now, what do they do next after this season or however this season concludes? I don't know. I believe that maybe some moves can be made to add some additions to the roster, but for the most part, it's going to have to be either vet minimum guys or this team is going to have to draft really well, but that's going to be very difficult to do when, they gave up a lot of draft capital to go after Mikal Bridges. But I still feel as if like the Knicks are the Knicks. They are who they are, and I don't view them as a title contending team, so neither should you. So y'all think that I should come up here like everybody else and kill a team that can't beat other teams who are performing at historic levels? No. Like, OKC beating the brakes out of everyone. It ain't just the Knicks. They beating the brakes out of everyone, bro. That's what they're doing right now. Put more respect on OKC, and then maybe we'll have a conversation. Y'all sitting there surprised like, oh my God, they lost to the Pistons. You know what? That's my fault. I need to make a Pistons video because the Pistons are just a way better team than people actually realize. So when they beat the New York Knicks, y'all shouldn't be going crazy like, oh my God, what's going on with the Knicks? Nothing. The Pistons are just better than what y'all thought they were. That's okay. Acknowledge the Pistons, acknowledge OKC, but acknowledging a team that we all knew was going to have problems going into the season, that does not make any sense to me. None. We knew this already. Like, what the hell? But yo, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And yes, I gotta make that Detroit Pistons video because they deserve a lot of love and recognition. So look out for that next. And until next time, I'll see you all later. Peace.